This is why you should be careful when buying an AMD Radeon RX 580 in 2023. So there are two main versions, pretty much, of the RX 580. There's the 2048 SP version and the 2304 SP version. These are both 2048 SP versions. The 2048 SP version is kind of like a 570, but overclocked to like 580 speeds, and it has slightly worse performance than a 2304, but better performance than a standard 570. You can pick these cards up for very, very cheap nowadays, because since the crypto mining crash, they have been absolutely flooding the market. You can find them anywhere, and they're super cheap. But the reason why you should be careful is because these cards can easily be faked from a 470 or a 480, and then someone just installs the 580 BIOS, and then you have what looks like a RX 580, but it's actually a 570 or a 470 or even 480. And you can see all the people that are saying they got scammed or they got a different graphics card all over the internet. So anyway, so this is the real RX 580 2048 SP. Don't know if you can see on that label, but it says 580 ARM SP 8G. And then this is supposed to be a fake one, but I think it might actually be a 580, to be honest. It's supposed to be a 470, but with a 580 BIOS installed. But I actually think it might be a 580, to be honest. And we'll find out later if that's true. So these have been absolutely flooding the market pretty much for years now, and they're mainly from crypto mining. Like, you can see this one only has a DVI, so it's obviously a crypto mining card. This one has both, but might have been used in crypto mining as well. But the great thing about these crypto mining cards is that you can just install the gaming BIOS that you need, if you can find it, that is. But most likely it shouldn't be too hard to find. And it should perform pretty well, like a 580 should, and you can get some good performance in games. So I managed to pick these up for super cheap. I think they're like $30 each in the converted currency. This Asus one with just DVI on it was obviously a lot cheaper than this one, which has DisplayPort and HDMI. So we're going to test out these cards and see if this is really a 580 or a 470. And we're going to compare these two so we can see exactly what the difference is. Okay, so we're going to open up the graphics card now. And now we can see the chip inside. And then if we look for the code name, there we can see it. So it's 21509100052, and then we can look that up, and we can see that it corresponds to the RX 580 2048 SP as well as the RX 570. Okay, so we're in the desktop now, and we've got the RX, or the fake RX 580 plugged in, and supposedly it's supposed to be an RX 470, but we've got gpuz open here. And we can see that it says RX 580 2048 SP, and everything looks to be pretty much correct. We've got 8GB of memory, 2048 unified shaders, Zeus, everything looks to be correct. And even if we click look up here, usually this tells us what it is. Okay, so once we load that open, we can see that it says AMD Radeon RX 580 2048 SP. Which is not really what I expected. I was expecting it to show the 470, actually, or maybe even the 570. And the fact that we opened it up and we saw the code number here, and it's exactly the same as this, it kind of inclines me to believe that this is actually an RX 580 2048 SP. And since it's a mining card, they'd probably give it for pretty cheap, because it only has one DVI output anyway. So this is the card I thought it was going to be originally. It's the RX 470 mining. And this, as you can see, has one DVI port, if I can find it, one DVI. And that's it, that's the same as my card. And everything looks to be pretty similar, but the code number here is completely different. So that makes me think that it's probably not this card. And obviously the clock speeds would be different because it's got a different BIOS on it. So we can see in the AMD software that it correctly, or incorrectly, I'm not really too sure, recognizes it as a RX 580 2048 SP. And everything looks to be normal here. And so I guess we can test it out with a real RX 580 2048 SP, see if there's a difference in performance, and I guess we might be able to tell if there's a real difference, but who knows really, because even a fake RX 580, like a 570 or a 470, with the 580 BIOS should perform probably pretty similar to the 580 2048. Alright, just to check, we'll open up this MSI graphics card, the RX 580, the real one, and we can see what's inside. And we can also do this thing where we just open it with the pliers so we don't have to remove the warranty seal. Not as if it makes a difference though, especially on a 5-6 year old card. Okay, so that's the code number. We can see it's the same as before, so this is definitely an RX 580, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so let's get started with Red Dead Redemption 2. We've got everything pretty much on ultra and high. We've got MSI turned off though. So for the Asus card, we got an average FPS of 30.7, a 1% low of 27.6, and a 0.1% low of 26.6 FPS. So that's pretty decent. In Red Dead Redemption 2, we got everything cranked up to ultra, and we can compare that to the 580, the MSI, the real one, and we got an average of 29.1, a 1% low of 23.7, and a 0.1% low of 18.8. So the Asus card actually outperforms the MSI card here. So it kind of seems like that the Asus card is really a 580. Realistically, I would have expected this to be much closer. Like, I know it's only a couple of FPS, but really these cards are pretty much identical in terms of specs. So it's a bit interesting that the one that I thought was the RX 470 outperforms the RX 580. Okay, now we've got GTA 5. So we've got everything pretty much on high or ultra settings, and we've also got MSAA disabled, but we've got FXAA enabled, and hopefully we should get some quite high FPS with this. So on the fake in quotation marks, RX 580, we got an average of 103 FPS, a 1% low of 71.7, and a 0.1% low of 70 FPS. So this is in comparison to the real RX 580, with a 102.6 FPS average, 1% low of 71.4, and a 0.1% low of 48.4 FPS. So again, the Asus graphics card, the one that should be a 470 according to SOTTR, is probably a 580 because it outperforms the 580, the real 580. Again, just from normal use of this graphics card, you'll never be able to tell the difference, because if you look at the FPS at the bottom, you can see that they're pretty much the same like all the time, and you would hardly be able to tell the difference. Okay, Shadow of the Tomb Raider next, and we've got it set to the highest settings, and we've also got TAA anti-aliasing enabled. So in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, on the RX 580 Asus card, so the one on the left, we got 49.1 average FPS, 42.9 as a 1% low, and a 0.1% low of 41.2 FPS. And then that's a comparison to the MSI 580, where we got an average of 46.8, a 0.1% low of 40, and a 1% low of 40.6 FPS. So the Asus card on the left is always outperforming the RX 580, the MSI version that we know is the RX 580. So I think it's fair to say that it's probably a 580, the Asus card. Okay, so we've got Forza now. We've got it on extreme, and we've got anti-aliasing turned off. So in Forza, on the Asus RX 580, we got 38.3 average FPS, a 1% low of 27.2, and a 0.1% low of 4.2. For the MSI version, we got 35.2 for an average, a 1% low of 17.4, and a 0.1% low of 4.1. So this performed quite well, to be honest, because I had it on the extreme settings. The 1% and 0.1% lows could have been better. But again, the Asus card outperforms the MSI card, so maybe it has some kind of better BIOS or it's overclocked slightly. even though the specs show that it should be pretty much exactly the same. But the difference between these results is very, very small, so it doesn't really matter, I think, in this case. Okay, Starfield now, we're going to go on medium settings. So on the Asus Graphics Card, we got an average of 53 FPS, and a 1% low of 27.6, and a 0.1% low of 21.2. So this is pretty decent for this game, I think, and like again, the MSI 580 did worse in comparison. It got an average of 52.8, a 1% low of 27.7, and a 0.1% low of 20.9. So these results are very, very, very close compared to the other ones, even closer. And it's literally like 0.2 or 0.1 of FPS of difference, so they're pretty much the same. So in 3D Mark, we got a 3945 score for the Asus card, and a 3722 graphics score for the MSI card. So even here it shows that the Asus card is outperforming the original 580 MSI. So I think we can say that the RX 580 Asus card is slightly better than the MSI graphics card, and I also think that it's pretty much going to be an RX 580, the Asus card. Given that gpuz says that it's an RX 580 2048 SP, and that we looked up the code number on the graphics chip and it came up as the RX 580 or 570, I think it's safe to say that it's probably the 580 in the Asus card, even though it was advertised as a 470 with a 580 BIOS. And we can also see from the performance results that it performs quite well, especially when compared to the RX 580 original, so I'm pretty sure it's an RX 580. In most cases this would probably be a good thing for most people, but I kind of wanted the 470 with the 580 BIOS, but whatever. Unless I'm completely wrong and maybe it is a 470 and it's got the overclocks and the BIOS on it. So someone can say in the comments if you know anything. Go ahead. Also, listen to how the Asus card sounds when it's plugged in. It must be suffering from mining issues over the years.